Okay, now that we've been through the chapter talking about process costing, let's take a look at one of the homework problems. I believe you have two. We'll take a look at this first homework problem dealing with preparing essentially a process cost report for a particular month to account for the physical units that came through our department, the ones that are finished, the ones that are still here, and we want to compute what the costs are of the units that are completed and the ones still here. And that's that four-step process that we go through to determine that. And this first problem actually walks us through it. It gives us the information, as you'll notice. Then it's going to have us compute the equivalent units of production. Then it's going to want to know the cost per unit for both materials and conversion costs. And then we're going to use those to compute the cost of the units gone and the cost of the units that are still here. So that's what we're going to work out together here. And again, however you want to organize it in your mind, I like to use that the spreadsheet that I loaded at Canvas. And that's what I'll use using this problem, and I'll show you kind of how I would attack this problem. Okay, it looks like we've got it says Victory Company uses the weighted average process cost. Now that's all we do is weighted average. I think the appendix has a FIFO method. We're not going to do that. We're sticking with the weighted average. It says conversion costs are added evenly throughout the period, which is always the case in our class. If a particular unit is 60% of the way through the process, it's got 60% of its conversion costs. It goes on to say that direct materials are added at the beginning of the process. So even if a unit is at the 1% point, 1% converted, it is full. I mean, it is done with regard to materials. It has a full charge material cost. So even materials at units at the 99% point have the same unit material cost as units at the 1% point, because they all get them right at the beginning of the process. Okay, it says during November the company, okay, so we're working with November. Then it starts giving us all these units and the dollar amounts and that kind of thing. So here's where we need some way to organize our data. So I'm going to do it like this. Hopefully we can get this all on one screen. I'm going to try. I haven't actually tried this. So if I put this over here, and let me get rid of this. And I put this here and show it on the other half of the screen. I think we can do something. Well, let's see. How's this actually working out? Let's see. I think that's working out okay. So I'm going to start here. Now remember what step one is. If I were to scoot this over this way, okay, maybe we'll do it this way. Okay, there's the entire problem, and then here's my spreadsheet. Okay, now remember what step one is to get a handle just on the number of units. How many did I start with? How many did I actually begin this month? And how many did I finish? And how many are still here? So looking at this problem, it says that, where does it talk about the units? It says right here, during November, the company transferred 760,000 units of product to finished goods. So I know that it actually finished 760,000. Make that a little bit bigger so we can see it. You can see it a little bit better. Okay, good. 760,000. It goes on to say that at the end of November, the work in process inventory consists of 188,000 units that are 70% complete. Okay. There are 188,000 units in ending inventory that are 70% complete with regard to conversion costs. How complete are they with regard to direct material costs? Well, remember, materials are added at the beginning of the process, so they are 100% complete here. 100% complete. Okay. Now, where else does it talk about units? So we've got this side done. We know that we finished 760,000 and there's still 188,000 here. But how many of those were from beginning inventory and how many were actually started? It goes on to say that down here it says beginning work in process consisted of 74,000 units that were 100% complete with regard to materials, because materials are added at the beginning of the process, and they were 80% complete with regard to conversion costs. Of the units completed, 74,000 were from beginning inventory, and 686,000 were units started and completed. Now this is a little confusing, but I just know this, that we had beginning inventory had 74,000. So now we have 3 of these 4 that we've talked about. I know that I finished 760,000 and that I still have 188,000. That is 948,000 physical units that I can account for. Where did they come from? Well, on this side has to equal 948,000 as well. Of those 948,000, 74,000 came from beginning inventory. So how many did I actually begin? Looks like I actually began 874,000. So, just making sure these add up. Yep. So to look at it from this direction, we started the month with 74,000 units left to finish. I began another 874,000. That's a total of 948. Where are they now? 760 are gone. 188,000 are still in ending inventory. Now, what does this mean right here? Remember, this was a little confusing. It said that of the units completed, 74,000 were from beginning work in process. 686,000 were units that were started and completed. Well, that 686, what they're saying is this 760 is made up of 74,000 of those and 686,000 of those. Well, where's the other units? If 686,000 of these were completed, where are the other 188,000 still in ending inventory? So that was a little weird. That was a strange number that they gave us, this 686. I don't know if it's there to just confuse us or what. But, yeah, these 760,000, where did they come from? Well, 74,000 were from beginning inventory. 686,000 were units that actually started and completed. And the rest of these 874, 188,000 are still here. But anyway, so we have finished step 1. We've gotten a handle on the physical number of units. So we know how many units we're working with. Now let's drop in some costs. It says that, and that's these costs right over here, the material and the labor and the overhead costs all come from the accounting records. It says that beginning inventory had 246,480 of direct materials and 111,450 of conversion costs. The direct material cost added in November, right here, boom, was 1,649,520. And the, let's see, and the conversion costs added were 117,550. They didn't break this down to labor and overhead, but you know what? They don't really have to. Because remember, when I'm calculating per unit costs, I'm considering labor and overhead to both be conversion costs. So I'm just going to make this one column, and it was, how much was it? 117,550. Okay, so I'm going to add these guys. Beginning inventory was a total cost of 357,930. Total conversion costs added during the period were 367,070. for a grand total of, oops, no, I don't want to do that. For a grand total of $4,125,000. Now remember, what I'm ultimately trying to do with that is to allocate this total 4125 to the units that are done, these 760,000 that are done, and to the units that are still here. So they will total up to the same amount. Yeah, how much of this 4,125,000 is assigned to these 760 that are gone, and how many are assigned to these 188,000 that are still here that I need to continue working on next month? Okay, well now we're at step 2, which is the equivalent units of production. And all that is that's where we work with the units that are completed and the units that are still here to find out the equivalent whole units they represent. Well, first, recognize that the units completed, the 760,000, because they're done, they not only represent whole units, they are whole units with regard to both cost factors. They are whole units. The ending inventory, these 188,000, they are 100% complete with regard to materials. So how many units do they represent with regard to materials? 188,000. Because the materials are added at the beginning of the process. They are whole with regard to materials. They just haven't been completely converted yet. These 188,000 that are 70% completed, how many equivalent units do they represent with regard to conversion costs? Well, 188,000 that are 70% completed is equivalent to 131,600 that are completed. Now we can add up these columns to find out the total equivalent units of production for materials as well as for conversion costs. That was step 2. Now notice that the problem did tell us that beginning inventory was 80% complete with regard to conversion costs. These units were 80% complete. Notice that I did not need that for my computations. I only need to know the percentage of ending inventory complete. And they're not throwing it in there to confuse us. That's a fact. They were 80% complete. But we don't need to know it at the end of the month. Now, step 3. This is step 3. Computing the equivalent units of the equivalent unit of production cost, the cost per unit. And that's simply saying, well, I made for direct materials here, for direct materials, I produced the equivalent of 948,000 units. How much material cost is in those 948,000? Well, here's the material costs. They are the material cost in beginning inventory. So I'm just going to color code these so you can see where they're coming from. Yeah, they are simply total material costs, or what I started with, plus what I added. And for that, what was the equivalent units of production for direct materials? 948. So it comes out to $2 per unit. Now do the exact same thing for conversion costs. Here's the conversion costs that I have. Let's see, what color should I make those? How about just something that kind of stands out a little bit? Maybe that. Okay. Bluish, okay. So what is the total conversion cost that I'm working with? This is why we call it the average cost method, is because I'm averaging the current cost with what we're still here from last time. That's the reason. Total conversion cost, 2,229,000. And how many equivalent units of production did I have for conversion costs? 891,600. Total conversion cost, $250 per unit. So one whole unit costs $4.50. $4.50. Great. Now, I'm going to do something here that, now this problem actually asks for this, so this is why I'm going to do this. Kind of break this up a little bit. All borders, get rid of this, get rid of this. Okay. Now, we want to know what did the units cost that are completed, the 760,000 units that are completed, what did they actually cost? Well, each whole unit cost $4.50. So they cost $3,420,000. Now, if I wanted to know, well, how much of that is materials and how much is conversion cost? Well, I could figure it out. Of that $4.50, $2 is material cost. So isn't the material cost, isn't that equal to the 760 times $2? And how much of this was conversion costs? $2.50, so equals the 760 times $2.50. Yeah, that's if we wanted to break down. But all I really need to know is this number. That's the number I'm going to make an entry to transfer this cost out of this work in process into the next department. Now, how about ending inventory? Well, I could plug it. I could force it here because I know that if of this 4125, if 3,420,000 is going to these 760, well, the rest must be the 188. But we don't want to plug numbers. We want to prove them and make sure that they work, so we catch our mistakes if there are any. So let's start off with this: 188,000 units. How much material cost is in them so far? Well, one whole unit has $2 of material cost. How many whole units with regard to material costs do these represent? 188,000. So those 188,000 units have 376,000 of materials. How about conversion costs? They don't have the full bore conversion cost. One whole unit has $2.50 of conversion costs. How many whole units with regard to conversion costs do these 188,000 represent? They represent 131,600 whole units. So they would have the equivalent of the conversion costs in 131,600. So 131,600 times 250, 329. So the total cost of the units in ending it. There we go. The total cost of these 188,000 units in ending inventory is 705. Do these add down? And the answer is yes, they do. Yes, they do. So now we've got the entire picture here. I know I'm going to need to make an entry to transfer this out of this amount. This is the cost of the 760,000 units that are completed. They're gone. I need to credit this out of this work in process account and debit them to the next department in my process, or to the finished goods if I'm the last department. But let's go back, and now here's the questions they're asking. They're asking, what are the equivalent units of production? What are the equivalent units of production? And essentially, this is what they're asking right here. They're asking for this. See, 760, 188, 948. It's the same. It's these three columns. They're just putting the percentages in to show what I multiplied them by. Yeah, there they are. Next, they want the per unit cost. So essentially, that's what's right here. Now, I did it horizontally. They're doing it vertically. So notice the material costs. I took my two material costs, the 246,480 and the 1,649,520, divided it by the 948 to get $2 a piece. That's what they did. They just did it vertically. And they did the conversion cost vertically. I did it horizontally. I don't think it's a bad thing to actually look at it a couple different ways, because that's the way you're going to understand it. Then finally, they use those costs to determine what the units transferred out were, these 760,000, and the units still here. And this is why I added this, because in this particular problem, they wanted to know what was the material cost, what was the conversion cost, and what was the total cost of those units completed. And then in ending work in process, they said what was the equivalent units of production for material cost times the cost. Gives you the 376 material cost in ending work in process. And same thing for conversion costs. The equivalent units of production times the total cost for one whole unit gives you the cost of the conversion cost in ending work in process. So they're basically doing this column, the fourth step. That was the first problem. And I really do think that something like this would help us. To help us, if we just do the whole problem, just calculate it out, make sure it all balances. And the way you know it balances is when you get to the fourth step. If these add down to the same amount as these, well, you know you worked. It worked out. Then ask them, what do you want to know? What is it that you want to know? Yeah. That's the way the problem would be worked out, actually. Want to do another one? I thought that was going to take a little longer, but it did not. So we're only at 21 minutes. You know what? We can do the next problem right now. I'm just going to clear this. Just reset it. Get rid of some of these formulas and okay. It's all reset. Now what's your next problem? The next problem in this particular case is drag it open here a little bit. Fast Company. Now this one is actually going to go through and prepare a production cost report, I believe. Yeah, here's the entire production cost report. Step. Okay, boom. So there's step 1, step 2, equivalent units of production, step 3, cost per unit, step 4. Okay, let's go through and do this one. Actually, this is kind of a fun chapter once you get used to it. Fun from an accounting point of view, certainly, but okay. It says Fast Company produces its product through a single processing department. Oh, well, good. Single process. Direct materials are added at the start of production. Okay. Conversion costs are added evenly throughout. Company uses the monthly reporting periods for its weighted average. We always use weighted average. Work in process inventory has a balance of 92,300 as of October 1st, which consisted of 19,500 of direct materials and 72,800 of conversion costs. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drop some numbers in. I need those, don't I? It said work in process had a beginning inventory on October 1st, had a total account balance of 92,300. That's this guy right here. Made up of 19,500 in materials and 72,800 in conversion costs. Yeah, those are the costs in beginning work in process inventory. They haven't told me how many units they have yet, but we'll get there. During the month, the company incurred the following costs. Direct materials. Oh, they added direct materials of 171,600 and conversion 990,400. So we've got total costs here of 125,400. Now remember, what I'm trying to do is I am trying to allocate this 125,400 to the units completed and the ones still here. Now if there are no units here, if I finished everything this month, well then they'll all be assigned to the units completed. But that's not the case. So far in the problem, this is all they've given me is just the costs. During October, the company started 148,000 units, began 148,000 units. I wonder how many we're here to start with. I don't know. But it did say the company started 148,000, transferred 158,000 to finished goods. It finished 158,000. At the end of the month, the work in process inventory consisted of 24,000 units that were 80% complete with regard to conversion costs. How complete were they with regard to direct materials? 100. They did say in the beginning of the problem, materials were added at the beginning of the process. So these guys have all of their materials. Okay, well, they didn't tell me how many units were in beginning inventory. But because we know these columns have to add down to the same amount, we can calculate it. So the physical units are, I can account for 182,000 units. 148,000 of them were begun this period. So how many did I actually start with? 34,000. I'm just taking the 182 that's got to match this minus the 148. So I started with 34,000 units. Well, step one's done. I've got a handle on the number of physical units. That's step one. And you know what? That's all I need to finish this report, I believe. I believe that's everything that I need. Because I can do step two now, can't I? These 158,000 that are completed represent whole units with regard to, material costs and conversion costs. These 24,000, they're done with regard to materials, so they represent 24,000. These 24,000, they're 80% complete, so they would be the equivalent of equals 24,000 times 80%, 19,200. So there's my total equivalent units of production with regard to materials and conversion costs. Now, step three, cost per unit. We're just going to divide the total material cost by the equivalent units of production for materials. And we're going to do the same thing for conversion costs. Well, here's your material cost. Here's your equivalent units of production for material cost. So it looks like materials were $1.05 a unit. Conversion costs. Here's your total conversion costs, including beginning inventory. Here's your equivalent units of production. So it looks like $6 in conversion costs to convert that pile of raw materials into a finished product. So each unit costs each unit costs $7.05. So what did these 158,000 units cost? They cost $7.05 a piece. And if you want to know how much of that total cost is materials, well, we can take the material cost is just the number of units times $1.05. And if you want to know how much is conversion cost, it's the number of units times the $6. It just gives us a little bit more information, doesn't change the total. Now let's compute the ending inventory. These 24,000 units, they represent 24,000 units with regard to materials, and one whole unit has $1.05 in materials. So the material cost in these is 24,000 times $1.05. Oops, I think I put that in the wrong. Oh, that's where I was. Need it right here. Material costs for materials. It's equal to the equivalent number of units it represents times the material cost. Conversion costs. Each unit has $6 of conversion. It takes $6 to convert. These 24,000 represent 19,200 units. So they have the same cost as 19,200 units would cost. So in total, these 24,000 of units in ending inventory have a total cost of 140,400. So total costs accounted for now, units completed and the units in ending inventory, matches. So that's how we know we balance. Production, or this, now we're done. I've got all the information. What do the authors want to know? Well, first they want to know what are the costs, the total cost to account for. What are they asking for? They're asking for this right here. They're asking for just this column. Just these guys. Oops. Well, actually just this right here. That's all they're doing. Total cost to account for, it's got to be the same amount, of course. Now, then they wanted to know the units to account for and the units accounted for. That's really step one. They're wanting to know how many units to account for and where are they now. That's exactly what they're doing here. Let me drag this across a little bit so we can see a little bit better. You can see that's exactly what they're asking for. The 34, the 148, and the 182. And where are they now? 158 are done, 24,000 are done for the 182. That was step one. Step two, they wanted us to calculate the equivalent units of production. And that's what we did here. There's the total units, the equivalent units for materials, equivalent units for conversion costs. And you can see that's what they did. The total units, equivalent units for materials, equivalent units for conversion costs. Step three, cost per equivalent unit. Again, they did it horizontally. I did it vertically. For material cost, I took the beginning inventory plus the materials I added during the period to get the total, divided by the equivalent units computed back in step two to get a cost per unit. And that's exactly what they did. They did the same thing for equivalent units, or for conversion costs. Finally, they wanted to know step four. What are the costs in the units transferred out? It was this right here. That's all they're asking. With the computation. And what's the cost of the units still in inventory? This is what they're asking right here. And they're totaling it up to show that it works. In the second part of the question, they want to know what's the journal entry required? What's the journal entry required as a result of all of this? Well, remember what I'm trying to do. I want to know how much of my total costs this period are assigned to the units that are done. I need to get this out of my work in process because they're gone. That's why we credit work in process for 1113900. And we're going to debit what? Well, we're going to debit the wherever they're going. And since this problem said it was a single processing department, I'm the only processing department. When it leaves here, it goes to finished goods. Yeah, there it is. Again, that's how it's done. With so many numbers jumping around, we just have to figure out a way to organize the information, and I think this is a good way to do it. So there's the homework problems. Work through yours. Watch these videos again. Pause them as you go. Whatever works best for you. And that is the entire chapter, process costing. The more you do, the more it's going to make sense. So hopefully that's working out well for you. I believe let me see here. I believe that we are continuing to work on this for a while yet, for this week anyway. So keep working away, and let me know if you have any issues.